It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Thank you very much, Graham. Yes, 65 million people around the world suffer from epilepsy, and chances are you've been around someone who's had an epileptic seizure. The question we're asking today is, what do we do? Can this condition be managed? And with us live in our studio this morning, Dr. Darren Green, our multimedia health specialist. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You also get a chance to speak to Doctor if you have a question or comment. 083 9133728. That is our direct line, and you will be live if we take your call this morning. Doctor, what is epilepsy? And also, what happens during an epileptic seizure?
I think that the biggest thing people need to understand is that the nerve cells of the brain, especially on the surface of the brain, the outer layer, they all involve electrical activity. So those nerve cells speak to each other by means of sending electrical signals. And some have to switch on and others have to switch off to facilitate this movement of a message. So that runs in a harmonious fashion. But what happens sometimes is that signal movement and that signaling can become irregular, can become erratic. And when you have that erratic signal in a perfect harmony or environment, it causes then obviously disruption of that surface electrical activity, which can then so-called short circuit the brain. And that's what leads to then obviously the symptoms and signs of epilepsy, which involve specifically the part of the brain that this electrical abnormality or imbalance occurs. So you'll then have, for example, just staring episodes in what they call absent seizures, or you could have a full-blown tonic-clonic convulsion, which is where someone actually pulls stiff and starts jerking around, thrashing around, and so forth. But there's quite an array and a spectrum of the different types of seizures one gets.
But it brings me to this. If there is a spectrum of signs that shows that this person is having an epileptic seizure, how does it manifest? I mean, how does one know how to diagnose the condition?
Yes, so you have to take a thorough history. So obviously the person that might have a generalized epilepsy attack might not remember a thing of what happened to them at the time. They can't even remember how it started, how it came on. So you often need collateral from a family member, a friend that witnessed the attack. Other than that, you'll also ask some pertinent questions about the childhood history of the person involved. Did they have, for example, any seizures associated with fever in their childhood? Was there a history of hypoxic brain injury or head trauma or electrolyte disturbances at some stage preceding? But clinically, what you'd look at, obviously, are things like, if they lose consciousness, are they aware of the surroundings when they come to, when they're awake or not? Do they actually black out, as we call it? Are there any twitches of the muscle involved, the face, the arms, the legs, and so forth? And post-ictally, in other words, after the seizure, are they confused, disorientated? Do they have severe headaches? And to demonstrate that lack of consciousness, often they bite their tongues and stuff like that during the seizure.
I have so many questions around this because I'll never forget it. I played hockey university level, and one of our players had an epileptic seizure on the field. And we all kind of tried to walk away because the last thing you want is for that person to gain consciousness and then people are around you staring.
You feel embarrassed, yes.
So I guess that there's a lot of social rules, one can say, also around someone having a seizure?
For sure. I think because people don't know what's going on, everyone really gets anxious and actually doesn't know how to help the person that's now collapsed to the ground and so forth. Well, the first thing, you need to help them prevent injury. So if they, for example, are in a dangerous place where from jerking and having abnormal movements during the seizure, they can, for example, fall off a cliff, on a mountain, on the field, for example, on a concrete slab, they can bang their head against the slab, cause head injuries. You want to just transfer them to a safe place.
Okay.
Very difficult. Often it involves, obviously, turning them on their side. Lots of people think that you must take out the dentures of someone that has dentures so that you don't obstruct the airway when they lose consciousness momentarily.
Doctor, we're going to talk about safety now because I want to know more about this. If you want to talk about and know about safety, what happens when someone has an epileptic seizure, stay with us because we are talking about epilepsy today. 65 million people around the world suffer from this. We're going to get back to Darren Green and also your questions. 083 9133728. It's time for the news first.